It's a 1930s era luxury ocean liner that's permanently moored at Long Beach, and you can actually visit there, eat there, and spend the night. It's a hotel now, but is it haunted? In 2009, Ryan from BuzzFeed Unsolved recorded a very compelling video of a plastic bag being apparently jerked upright and a tube of toothpaste plummeted to the floor. This was in a bathroom on the Queen Mary. Have you ever seen that video?
Yes, I have. And I agree that it is in fact very compelling. And there was nobody nearby. It didn't it couldn't move from the wind. It looked pretty creepy to me.
Yeah, it looks like the bag just kind of jerks up and it looks like it's being tugged by an invisible hand upward. Yeah. Check that out. You can find the BuzzFeed Unsolved video on the Queen Mary. So we're going to talk about everything ghosty related to the Queen Mary today. The magnificent vessel has a long history that predates Ryan from BuzzFeed. It was used as a filming location for an episode of The X-Files, and many, many, many people, 55 in total, have died on its decks. Andrea Anthony Moore is joining me on the podcast this week to talk about it. She's from Los Angeles, currently living in Long Beach, and is a ghost appreciator and a lover of LA history. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Happy to be back. I love the Queen Mary.
And I love that I get to talk about this with you, and you live in a place where you actually see the Queen Mary all the time.
I do. Yep. I feel like almost every day I can take a look at her.
Oh, wow. And I actually, have you been inside her?
Yeah.
Okay. I've never been inside, so I feel like I have to rectify that.
Yeah, you do.
And we always do this on the episode. What is the spookiest thing that's happened to you this week?
So I was listening to another podcast.
Another podcast?
I know. How dare I? Drag queens interviewing drag queens. And they were and one of them was talking about this alien visit that she had as a child. And then I was thinking about my childhood, and I was like, because I had these beings that would come to my room for a year when I was 5. And I just sort of wrote it off as are they ghosts? And I'm now I'm thinking maybe they were aliens. But it had me thinking about it, and I'm still not sure.
You had beings visiting your room when you were 5.
Yeah, they were these solid shapes, sort of humanoid solid shapes, and there was a red one, a green one, and an orange one, and they would stand next to my bed at night and just stare at me. But they were just they didn't have faces or anything. It was almost like a cartoon that was in real life. You know what I mean? One
that makes me think of the Tahunga contacts.
Yes.
One of the people talked about beings visiting her at night, and they were different colors. What also did you tell your parents about this?
I don't think so. I don't remember. And then we moved out of that place. So I don't know if it was attached to the place or attached to me, but yeah, I don't remember it happening again after that.
How many times did this happen?
I mean, it's hard to say because I was so little, but I want to say it was it felt like it was every night for the whole, and I think I was in that room for maybe a year because my mom and I had just moved to the States a couple years before. And we were kind of still figuring out what we were doing. And I was only in that room for a year. So.
And it was just you and your mom living.
It was me. So it was my mom and my grandparents and me in a condo in a retirement community. So that's already creepy because it's just a bunch of retired people and then my mom and me.
And I'm sure in a retirement community, people die there.
Yeah. No, I mean, most of them were in their 60s. They weren't at death's door. But of course, yes, it did happen. But yeah, I don't know what these beings were. I never saw them again. I have no explanations, but it made me think of it because this other drag queen had a similar experience.
Were you alarmed at all? What was your emotional experience of them?
I don't remember being alarmed. I think I was just sort of I would love to sleep, and it's I can't really do that if you're staring at me. So that would be great. But I wasn't scared. I didn't leave my room and go to try to get my mom. I think I was just kind of okay, I accept this. This is weird, but I accept.
I mean, it does remind me of alien visitations where whatever they put a gas or whatever, you just accept it and you're not scared. You're just this is what's happening. And they sedate you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am fascinated by whatever this is.
And it was like a one-time thing. It's not like, oh, I can like, and then it happened again, like later. And no, just when I was 5 and now I'm almost 40. So that was a long time ago.
I'll probably like be DMing you a lot with like random questions. And if you all are watching and listening and have questions for Andrea,
or if you've also seen these colorful beings, please let me know, because I'd love to know I'm not alone.
I know. Maybe we should do a deep dive and just like ask people to tell us, have you ever been visited by colorful beings? And they were like solid colors. I'm like, the way you're describing it, I'm picturing like someone in like a full length stocking, like that, like
yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or like a cloak that like maybe goes like over your head so you can't see the face, but sort of like almost like I said, like a cartoon. Like it had like little like edges of like a cartoon, you know, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really weird.
They seemed very two-dimensional.
Yeah, exactly. And like why they would come to this like condo in this retirement community in Del Rey is truly a question for the ages, but
wow, amazing. Okay, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about the Queen Mary. My spooky thing is still flickering lights. I told my landlord to fix the lights. He's like, wow, that's so weird because these lights are supposed to last for 10 years before they need to be changed. And I'm like, well, let's see if we can change them again because they're flickering. And then he couldn't get to the store fast enough. So I cut out a little black foam thing and I put it over the light because it's like so annoying. And so it's like that for now. But then I'm like, let me see if it just stopped flickering. And so it was almost like I put the light in detention for a little bit. Like,
right. And now
you're annoying me. And now it's behaving. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to talk about Queen Mary, but I also want to tell you, I have tarot cards. I want to learn. And I have some art that's like our flag tarot cards that are really pretty. And I haven't like learned how to use them yet.
Oh, cool. One of these days you and I should meet in person and we should do some tarot card reading stuff. Yeah. Yeah. That'll be fun. And maybe we go to the Queen Mary together and we do tarot cards on the Queen Mary.
Smart.
That would be really fun, and see who we can talk to. Because I'm very fascinated with this fellow who we're going to talk about who died on the Queen Mary, and he talks to people. And I'm very excited about that.
Oh, wait, I have to also tell you my funny story about the Queen Mary before we get into the history. So I have not stayed overnight there, but my mother-in-law has. And my mother-in-law is like a very like no nonsense woman, was in the military, like strong Black woman, like, you know, she's not one for, you know, going into silly things. And she went to stay on the Queen Mary, and she was like, she called my husband the next day and she's like, I was up all night, like hearing all these sounds and these like screams and whatever. And he was like, that's so weird. Well, then she realized the next day they had set up the haunted house for Halloween outside.
Oh my God.
She was hearing.
That's hilarious.
So not ghosts, just actors, but still pretty good.
That's really funny though. You have been to the Queen Mary.
Yeah, I've been inside. I did a historical tour, but not the ghost tour. And I actually went to a concert on the Queen. Like it was like inside and outside the Queen Mary. It was a Who cover band, but it was actually pretty fun. But it is really beautiful inside. Like if you like Art Deco, you know, and I wouldn't say that just like being inside is creepy, but I was also there for like an event, you know, when I was there most recently. I feel like if I was in there alone, even just in the entrance, no, I wouldn't want to do that.
Oh, wow. See, I am a scaredy cat of a lot of things, but the idea of going alone into a haunted building or something is very cool for me. And I would definitely do that. I would definitely love to be like alone in the Queen Mary. Have you ever like gone down into the depths, like where
and the historical tour we did, again, it wasn't a ghost tour. They didn't tell us any of the ghost stories, but I have like been through the whole like labyrinth. And that's the other thing too. It is literally a labyrinth inside. Like if you tried to go yourself, you'd probably die in there because you'd become a ghost and never get out because you can't find your way back.
And so like there's like a luxury portion, right? That has like where people stay. And then there's like
all of the engine room. And it's all like very close together. Like you make a wrong turn, you're in the wrong place, you know, it's like they're like super separated.
Oh, very cool. So let's get into like a little bit of the history, and I will take a meandering journey to get to the Queen Mary, but I think this is all interesting and relevant, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this story. So let's go back to August 16th, 1845. Frederick Douglass, who was enslaved until 1838 when he escaped by jumping on a northbound train, Frederick Douglass boards a steamship called the Cambria, which is bound from Boston to Liverpool. The passage would take 2 weeks because that's how long it took back in the day. And because Frederick is Black, he isn't allowed in a cabin and has to spend his journey in steerage. But people all around are talking about, are very curious about him being there, and they're talking about slavery. And Frederick, the reason he's there is he's on his way to Ireland, Scotland, and England, where slavery has been made illegal. And he plans to tell Europeans all about what slavery is like in America. The ship he's on, the Cambria, belongs to the Cunard Line. It's a British steamship, but still, even on a British steamship, a place in the world where slavery has been made illegal, he's being segregated. Frederick describes the passengers on the ship as slaveholders, apologists for slavery, and democratic mobocrats, which means they advocate for mob rule. And he says that there were cries of shame when he boarded.
Oh, sounds so hauntingly familiar.
I know. And nonetheless, there are some passengers who want to hear from Frederick. They want to hear what he has to say. Also, they're just very, very curious. On the last night of the voyage, the captain asks him to deliver a speech to the passengers. And this is a very of course, make the Black person do all the emotional labor of explaining why something is bad. And not only does the captain put the emotional labor on the Black person, but the captain then, when Frederick goes to speak, the captain goes to his cabin to go to bed.
He's like, good luck. You'll have fun. It'll be fine.
Yeah, tell them all about why slavery is wrong. I'm going to go to bed. So Frederick heads up to the saloon deck to speak. But of course, there's a white dude there who doesn't want him to be allowed to talk. Frederick manages 5 words, and the dude shakes his cane in Frederick's face and screams, lies, lies, lies. Hecklers start getting more and more insulting. An Irish soldier is there who is described as a man of gigantic size. He intervenes. The Irish is like, calm down, you guys. Frederick's like, okay, you guys, since everything I say, according to you all, is going to be lies, I'll just read what our legislator has to say on the matter. And he proceeds to read a list of laws from the Slaveholders Code of Regulations, which describe the punishments slave owners are allowed to give to enslaved people, which include lashings, cropping ears, disfiguring people. All of this are legal and allowed. And he's saying this to an audience of American, slave owning people, slave owning apologists, and then also foreigners. So these slaveholders are in this crowd of foreigners who are appalled that Americans do slavery, and they're hearing what slave owners actually do according to the laws of the land. And they're like, oh my gosh, none of this was ever intended to be shared publicly. They also find out that Frederick is going to be saying these exact things when he goes on tour in Europe, and they're all just horrified. There's nothing that they can do about it. And they start saying the absolute, most horrible things to Frederick Douglass. And they're the pro, slavery people and the anti-slavery people start fighting, and it's described as a riot. And the captain finally wakes up and comes down and threatens to put the pro-slavery people in irons. And finally, that settles things down. So Frederick finally arrives in England, and he does his tour, and hundreds arrive at the various places where he goes to speak. And in the spring of 1847, he's done with his tour. Some of his British fans actually purchase his freedom, so now he can return to the US and not be worried about being captured. He's a free man. He once again boards the ship, the Cambria, which is owned by the Cunard Ship Line. He has a first-class ticket. And this is a British ship where, again, slavery is illegal. But even boarding a British ship as a free man with a first-class ticket, Frederick is refused entry, and his ride is given to someone else. And the clerk is like, yeah, you got to go talk to the manager in Liverpool. I can't help you. And so he ultimately he goes to Liverpool. He talks to another agent. He's eventually allowed to board, but he has to eat his meals alone. He's not allowed to mix with the other passengers, and he isn't allowed his own cabin. And so because of this, Frederick writes an angry letter to the press about his treatment, and the story goes viral across Britain and inspires poems and songs about Frederick Douglass. This makes Frederick Douglass like famous even in all the European cities that he didn't speak in. And the man who refused Frederick's passage on the ship writes a letter to the Times attempting to justify himself. Ultimately, the owner of the shipping line, Samuel Cunard himself, issues an apology. He says, "No one can regret more than I do the unpleasant circumstances respecting Mr. Douglass's passage, but I can assure you that nothing of the kind will ever take place in the steamships which I am connected." And that is Samuel Cunard, who is responsible for the Cunard ship line, which created the Queen Mary. Do we think that he was genuinely sorry for the racism?
No, they never are.
He's a white people, and as a white people myself, white people are
not great at accountability.
They don't know. They don't care. This guy, he's a shipbuilder. He's all about, his whole life has been about how can I make as much money as possible. So Samuel Cunard was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia in 1787. He worked in banking, lumber, and whaling until he got a British contract to transport mail between Halifax, Newfoundland, Boston, and Bermuda. Then eventually from Britain to North America. And for that, he teamed with a shipbuilder and engineer named Robert Napier to build his first steamship, the Britannia. It was 207 feet long, 34 feet wide, and 100. See, this is me like reading numbers on the fly. Like,
it's so hard. Why is reading numbers so hard? Whatever. It's 1,000 tons. It's a lot. It's heavy.
I mean, when I'm reading it in my brain, I read it fine. But when the translation to my mouth, okay, yeah, it's 1,000 tons, capable of carrying 250 tons of cargo and 115 passengers. And on July 4th, Independence Day, 1840, with 65 passengers, the Britannia crosses from Liverpool to Halifax, then to Boston, and it's hailed as the most significant crossing of the Atlantic since the Mayflower. Cunard builds more ships and adds them to his fleet, all to transport mail and passengers. His priority is safety, not luxury. Other steamship fleets come along and try to compete with Cunard, but they don't prioritize safety the way that he does. And in one instance, Cunard's main competitor, Collins, has a ship that runs into a French steamer and 322 people die, including Collins' wife and daughter. And that company has another sinking, and a few other like accidents and just issues happen, and ultimately goes bankrupt. So Cunard still going strong. Collins, his competitor, didn't take safety seriously.
Hauntingly familiar. What happens when you don't prioritize safety?
I know. Like a little airplane company we can think of.
Just an airplane government agency that exists. Yeah, weird.
Yeah.
Well, I'm RIP to Colin's wife and daughter. That's very tragic. But
I know
why safety is important.
In the 1870s, the White Star Line comes along. Does that name sound familiar to children of the 90s?
Yeah, as a child of the 90s, of course I know about Titanic.
Yeah, of course we know that the White Star Line is the ship company that's responsible for the Titanic. Their ship, the Atlantic, sinks in 1873. So they start off right away, just not giving a shit. White Star Line, the Atlantic sinks in 1873. The Republic sinks in 1909, and then the Titanic sinks in 1912.
You'd think you'd learn after the first one, but I guess not.
Especially like 3 years after you get started, your ship sinks. You're like, okay, we got to change things. No, profits. So Samuel Cunard, of course, while he's alive, safety first. But he's not a vampire. He does actually die in 1865. Safety is still kind of important in the fleet, but they start to add a little more luxury. They want to be known as the luxury passenger ships. And safety does start to take a little bit of a second seat. Some of you Are you familiar with the Lusitania?
No.
Okay, so in World War One, like when World War One is just getting started, the Lusitania is a passenger ship. It's been going back and forth all over the places carrying passengers, right? World War One happens. The Germans put like these notices in all of these newspapers, like, hey, you guys, don't travel by sea. We have U-boats. We are not purposely fully aiming at passenger ships, but we can't be held responsible for if an accident happens. Okay. The Lusitania, though, still carrying passengers. And on May 7th, 1915, it gets torpedoed by a German U-boat during World War One. After Germany was like, hey, you guys, don't go across the sea. 1,197 of the 1,960 passengers die, and only 767 survive. And those that survive do so due to the heroism of the Irish rescuers. And this is a controversial sinking that happens because it sinks really fast and it kind of like blows up. And so they're like, were there munitions on the Lusitania? And in Britain, it's like, you don't even ask that question because that would be treasonous. So we don't talk about that. But other countries are like, were there munitions on the Lusitania? And yes, there were munitions on the Lusitania. Why are you shipping passengers and weapons at the same time on the same boat during a major world war after Germany said, we have U-boats, don't be shipping passengers across?
They're like, well, if you're going to go across, people, would you mind just taking
some weapons?
Just take some weapons.
Yeah, take munitions with you. Keep costs down. And also, the Lusitania is listed as an auxiliary warship.
Cool.
I personally, as a passenger, would like to be notified if I am crossing the ocean during a war, if my ship is being also an auxiliary warship.
Yeah, it might be important to at least include in the price, like, hey, this is 20% off because it's also, surprise, you're a soldier now.
So there's a lot of conspiracy theories, like, did Britain just kind of let the Lusitania sink and let all this happen so that the world would be like horrified by the Germans sinking a passenger ship and then make the Germans look bad? There's many podcasts and many videos and many documentaries about the Lusitania, and I only know like a little tiny bit. So I'm probably getting some things wrong. Definitely, if you're curious about this, look at people who know more about it than I do. But that's all to say that was a Cunard ship. It's after this happens, though, World War, One eventually ends. It's important for Britain to maintain a competitive position in the superliner world, since the White Star Line actually merged with an American company. So now they want to be the top guy. And the British government gives the Cunard Steamship Company a whole bunch of loans and subsidies, and they're able to start building 2 superliners. One of those is going to eventually be the Queen Mary, but the Depression hits and construction is suspended. And the British government still is like, we want these ships built no matter what. So they give them more loans. And in 1834, the Queen Mary is finished. I wanted to find out, because remember what Cunard said? He's like, no more racism on my ship at all. So I'm like, really? Did you hold your staff to that? So I read this long reads essay by Ethelene Whitmire called Traveling While Black Across the Atlantic Ocean. And Ethelene does a review of Black literature, of Black authors writing about going to Europe in the early 20th century. She does find out that while Black people are on the boat, the vibe is overall positive. And I put that down to white people being on their best behavior when they're paid to be, right? So it's like, okay, white people, you guys all need to act like you're on a boat from now on.
Your best boat behavior.
The racist anecdote that she did find was with Fisk University professor Giles Hubert, who sailed to Europe in 1936, the year before his trip to Denmark, with a group of students. Once they arrived in London, Hubert and two other African Americans were denied entry to the hotel that was reserved by Cunard. In protest, the entire group left the hotel to find other accommodations. So your Cunard travel agents are
not the most reliable.
Yeah, not the most reliable. And this is juxtaposed with two other accounts. Booker T. Washington noted, from the captain down to the most humble servant, we were treated with the greatest kindness, nor was the kindness confined to those who were connected with the steamer. It was shown by all the passengers also. There were not a few Southern men and women on board, and they were cordial as those from other parts of the country. This contrasts with classical pianist Eugene Haynes. Initially was isolated when he went to the dining room. They put him at a table by himself. There were only 12 others dining there, and the steward seated him at a table by himself. But within minutes, all the other passengers went to Eugene Haynes' table and sat with him and joined him. And that took care of the segregation on the high seas. And I like that story.
Unexpected.
Yes. Yeah. Impressive. I did read, though, that, Black passengers, maybe they had an okay time at sea, but when they got on land, the problem they had was with other American tourists. I read one story of some women. They encountered some Texans in Italy, and the Texans were horrible to them, making them give up their seats on like the train car and all of that. But after that first incident, then they basically found out that they could call the Texans out for being horrible. And that was satisfying to them. And I like that story. But check out Etheleen's Long Reads article, because it's really good about traveling while Black. And it's all good historical details and stuff. So let's get to the Queen Mary herself. I found a Popular Mechanics article from 1936 that reads, England's $30 million masterpiece of shipbuilding, the Queen Mary represents the latest achievement of British materials and Scotch engineering, a combination that has maintained England as mistress of the seven seas. That's I guess I don't ever think of British materials and Scotch engineering as a combo, but hey, I love the boat, so good job. And I don't know if you saw any of this while you were on the ship, but it says that it offers thousands of rooms and shops, theaters, restaurants, lounges, parlors, swimming pools, gymnasia, libraries, and gardens.
I mean, I think a lot of the rooms have been repurposed over the years, and I think we're going to get into some of the ways the use of the ship has changed over the course of history. But yeah, I mean, it definitely is a massive space with lots of, entertaining areas.
Yeah, and they had, I don't even know how this works, but they had telephones on the ship. This is pre-cell phone. I just mentally, my brain doesn't comprehend how this works, but they did. And I'm sure someone out there can tell me, how did telephones work on a ship?
Yeah, not me. Oh, no. I'm a whole idiot. I don't know. But that is pretty cool that they had that.
And they had air conditioning in the 1930s, which is great. The ship would become a favorite of celebrities and other high-profile people. Marty Martin, who we talked about in our second or third episode, I forget what, episode 5, just kidding, traveled to Europe many times on the Queen Mary. And the company wanted to make the Queen Mary the vessel of choice for Atlantic crossings. Their publicist coined the phrase, the ship of the beautiful woods, because the paneling had 56 different types of rare wood.
Beautiful. I don't know how much of that has survived at this point, but it does. I mean, it's still pretty.
And then by the 1940s, she's needed for the war. So they take all the luxury interiors out and they replace it with bunks. They put troops and stuff on it. And In 1942, October 2nd, 1942, the Queen Mary accidentally collides with a British cruiser named the Curacoa and slices this boat in half, killing over 337 people when the boat instantly sinks. And those who witnessed the accident are sworn to secrecy due to national security reasons.
And I feel like I read, and this might be a wrong memory, but I feel like I read that the Curacao was trying to guide the Queen Mary. So it was going back and forth, like trying to guide it to something. And they collided because the Queen Mary was too fast. They underestimated how fast it was going.
Wow. But like right off the jump, like killing, 300. So I'm like, okay, already you're entering ghost ship territory, right?
plus war, whatever.
Yeah. And at one point she carried 16,683 people from New York to Scotland, which just sounds like a lot of people. I don't know how many people are on cruise ships, which also looks really crowded
and gross.
but that is, I know. Yeah, I've heard like cruise ships like are very polluting. Like they dump their
and also like very germy.
Yeah, very pandemic.
Right. Spreading
diseases. Yeah. But that sounds like a lot of people. That's like that's more than some cities.
That's like a lot of cities are smaller than, or towns.
Right. And other than the 337 that died during you pronounced it better than me, Curacao. I pronounce it.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if it's Curacoa or Curacao, one of those.
Okay. I found that 3 deaths occurred during the war, probably more, because I'm sure there were probably like, I don't know. But in 1943, the Captain H.L. Fry died, and we don't have any record of why. In 1944, P.A. Hughes, a night steward, died of natural causes. And in 1945, P.H. Aspern, a USN, which I think means U.S. Navy, had a fatal fall from the ship. There's this plaque on the boat that has like a list of all the people that died. And I was surprised a lot of them were like heart attack situations.
Yeah.
And it goes to show like back in the day, a lot of people died of heart attacks.
Yeah.
So I think we've made some progress there in not smoking and not eating.
Not only eating butter and red meat.
I know, right? So in September 1946, the Queen Mary was no longer needed for war. Throughout the 1950s, the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth are the fastest and largest passenger ships in the world. They maintained that through the 50s, but in the 60s, jet travel starts being the main way people get to Europe and around. The Queen Mary starts losing 750,000 pounds by the year 1966. And the city of Long Beach buys the Queen Mary for $3.45 million in 1967.
So much money for a boat. I mean, I love it, but wow. We have a lot of oil money down here. I guess that's why.
Yeah, it's like a building, like think of like a skyscraper. Like that's probably like a similar thing. Yeah. And in 1971, the Queen Mary opens in Long Beach as a tourist attraction.
And where it stands to this moment, although I've heard many rumors it's sinking into the sea. So we'll see for how long it's there.
Yeah. And did you come across any interesting anecdotes in your research?
I put some notes here about like the different sort of haunted areas around the Queen Mary. One I'm going to touch on, but I want to go into it a little bit more when we get to our favorite ghost story. But our first one, Stateroom B340. Apparently there's a ghost of a man in there, Walter J. Adamson, who passed away, but we don't know why. And then in 1966, a woman who was staying in that room claimed that the covers were pulled off and there's a man staring at her. She screamed and he vanished into thin air. People have reported hearing knocking on that door. Hotel maids have said the water turns on and off. The room was closed for many years, but it's open now and actually is like a specific, you have to like book that specific room for ghost stuff. And I did watch a couple of videos of people staying in that room like very recently, including Ryan from BuzzFeed. He went back after the first time, second time he stayed in that room, but nothing happened. Yeah,
and Ryan from BuzzFeed stayed in B340, right? Mm-hmm. And didn't he say the covers were pulled off of him?
Well, that was on his first time that he went. When he went the second time, nothing happened.
Okay.
And then the one I watched where someone went pretty recently, like a YouTuber guy, I don't remember his name. He brought all of the like ghost things, all of the tools, the REM pod and there was some activity, but I'm also kind of like, how much of that was just like the energy of the room and like there's hella people around and it wasn't super convincing to me.
Yeah. Let's get into our favorite haunting.
Yes. Oh, I forgot my other interesting fact is that Disney wanted in on the Queen Mary, which I think is so funny. So there was, after it came to Long Beach in 1971, it had 1.5 million guests, which is pretty cool. And it looked like it was going to be a walk in the park for the Queen Mary to be this icon for Long Beach, and that, it would be easy to justify, oh, don't worry, residents of the city, that we spent $3 million on this. It's totally fine. Look how many tourists we're getting. We're making it up to you. But then in 1972, their Pacific Southwest Airlines moved in to operate the hotel functions, starting with 150 rooms and then 400 rooms. But then it switched over to the Hyatt and they were there till the 80s. So whenever there's a lot of changing of hands, that's, not always a good sign. The Hyatt actually bailed as interest in the ship began to wane in the late 1970s. But some new owners came in, the Rather Corporation with a W, Rather. But they had connections to the Disneyland Hotel. And so that's how Disney got involved. But one of the lead figures who was working on this, he died. So the ownership passed on again to none other than the Walt Disney Company in 1988. Crazy.
Wait, so does Disney own it now?
No. This is a short-lived experiment. So Walt Disney didn't really give a shit about the Queen Mary, but of course was interested in the land around where the boat is. And I don't know how familiar people are with the Long Beach geography, but where the Queen Mary is, like, it's literally just like a parking lot and then like the port. There is a lot of space there. So he had this idea that this is in the 1990s. This is like pretty recent history. So in 1990, Disney said they wanted to build a 443-acre theme park that would be known as Port Disney, which would have 5 hotels, a monorail, a theme park. There did also used to be a theme park, like a tiny little theme park in Long Beach called the really lame mall. So it really would have fit in. It would have been cute. But the forecast said it would take a decade to build and cost $2 billion. So it was a scheme that would never be. But what's sort of interesting about this and capitalistic AF is that it was around this time the ghost stories really became like very popular and the Queen Mary started to get known more as like a ghost destination, and it was actually Disney that offered the first ghost tours. Isn't that so funny?
Oh, that is really funny. And because it also kind of aligns with, in the 2000s, John Petter's sister. John Petter was the guy who got crushed in the door, started complaining about the ghost webcam that was set up there to see if John Petter's ghost would appear. She's like, this is really tacky, you guys.
Yeah, it is. But, Disney was the first, and they offered a tour called Haunted Passages, capitalizing on the many legends. It was advertised with a brochure that had an image of a small child being dragged down a hallway by a ghost.
Amazing.
I love that. So yeah, their intention was to make it obviously a less family-friendly place in Disneyland, but wanted people to feel like curious about coming in and seeing ghosts. And Long Beach was totally into the idea. They remained keen for the creation of jobs and for business and money and da-da-da. But officials and people who live here were reluctant to allow the infrastructure of this magnitude to exist on the coastline. Already in Long Beach, we're impacted by having the port. There's the harbor wall. That means that you can't surf in Long Beach. Like, there's already a lot happening here with our coastline that, people don't really even go to the beach here. They tend to go to Huntington, which that sucks. Nazi capital of Orange County and possibly Southern California. So yeah, it would have been a big impact here. But the California Coastal Commission also wanted Disney to do a $75 million donation to offset what would have been Port Disney's footprint. Disney would only commit to $50 million, as if they don't have the money. Whatever. They only commit to $50 million. So the California Coastal Commission refused to approve the project, and it got passed on again and again. And now Disney's not involved anymore. But what we do have, which is again what my mother-in-law experienced, was Dark Harbor, which they set up every Halloween time in the parking lot outside the Queen Mary, which is really fun if you like being scared. Which I do.
Wow. Is it like a haunted house sort of.
Yeah, it's very much like the Universal Studios Not Scary Farm, like that vibe. So like there's different ones you can go to and people walk around and, it's LA. They hire all the wannabe actors and put them in scary makeup. And I mean, you can like literally hear it if you're like driving by. Like,
wow.
Everybody's screaming. So it is really fun.
Cool.
But yeah, that's my weird fact about Disney. And they almost made a mini Disneyland over here around the Queen Mary.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. It sounds like it would have been fun, but it sounds like it would have been super capitalist. Yeah. As if the Queen Mary isn't capitalist crazy time already. Yeah.
Well, and again, like geography wise, it is pretty close to Disneyland. So like, and like I said, we're already so impacted between like the oil industry here and then tourism here and the break wall and blah, blah, blah. Like, let us have some things. So I think ultimately we're better off for it. But I do have my favorite scary story.
Yes. So let's hear, we're each going to share our favorite scary story about the Queen Mary. So Andrea will go first and I'll do mine. Tell us your favorite scary story.
So my favorite is based on Stateroom B340. It's supposed to be the most haunted and, frequently experienced things happen there. And again, the known sort of history is that there was this third class passenger, Walter Adamson, as I said, who died in the room, which was at that time known as B226. But that's not all. Apparently, there was back in the 60s, there was also a man who went crazy. And so this is all very like legend. I can't find anything that says that any of this is true. So this could have been made up by who knows? Wow. But there is some story that there was a crazy man that either murdered 2 women or he murdered his wife and daughter and then killed himself. There's a lot of like different sources say different things.
Is this guy's name on like that plaque of?
No, and there's no name, which makes it seem even less likely to be true. Yeah. But I still like as a true crime girly, I'm always like, ooh, how fascinating, a murder. So apparently this happened in one of the other rooms that at the time was not called B340, but then when they in one of the many renovations that they did, they combined different rooms and it became B340. But at one point they had to close the room because people were having so many scary experiences there. But there's also been variations that a woman killed her husband, a husband killed his wife. It was a lone passenger whose throat was cut. Like there's no record of any of these things ever actually happening, but I would be fascinated to know if that were true. But something I found in the book Ghosts of the Queen Mary by Brian Clune and Bob Davis, shout out to those men who wrote this book for some reason.
We'll have to put a link in the show notes.
It was the story of the father who murdered his family apparently can be traced back to 1959. And again, according to them, it was Disney who decided to create a room where the ghosts related to this would reappear, which is actually very dark. But those murders may have taken place in B474, not B340. So if you want to go and have a scary experience, B474, not B340, maybe. Or it's just Disney making things up. Who can say? But that is my favorite bit of lore about this boat.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to talk about the death and ghost of John Petter. So in March, during the ship's last year in operation as a passenger ship, an 18-year-old named John Petter gets hired as a fireman. And he's from Skipton, which is a small market town in North Yorkshire, which is north of Manchester. It's famous for, by the way, Skipton Sheep Day. I think we're both sheep fans here.
Big sheep appreciators.
Appreciators here. And it's a bit more than 90 minutes from the coast by car. So I'm sure that John Petter is stoked to have his first job. I'm sure he's probably never been on the ocean before, so he gets to travel around the world. And maybe he's a little afraid of being seasick. I certainly would be, but maybe he's thinking, it's a big ship, I'll get over it. So 4 months later, in July, John is tasked with pumping the bilge. And the bilge is at the bottom of the boat. Bilge water collects. And this is random water that like drains off the side of that doesn't drain off the side of the deck, that goes down a pipe into the bottom of the boat. And sometimes this is like your random garbage as you're cleaning, maybe urines down there, cleaning chemicals, stuff that goes down the drain. Sometimes it's just like seawater that's used as a ballast, and it's emptied when you get close to your destination. And this is actually, by the way, a major source of how invasive species species get introduced to different locations around the world, by the way. So it's in the early morning hours of July 10th, 1966. John Petter is pumping the bilge. This is while the ship is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The ship enters some fog, and as a precaution, the hydraulic watertight doors are shut. But an alarm sounds indicating door 13 didn't close all the way. At about 3:55 a.m., a refrigeration greaser, which I have no idea what that job is, but the refrigeration needs greasing, and he's the guy that does it. He heads down to the bottom of the ship and finds John crushed inside one of the doors. John has a trickle of blood dripping down his nose, and he's turning blue due to lack of oxygen. He's removed from the door, and he's brought up on deck. I guess his sister, Pauline Howard, is on board, but when she sees him, she can't tell whether he's alive or not. The medical staff on the ship give him morphine, but he's pronounced dead when he arrives at the hospital. And I'm not sure if they're referring to the ship's hospital or if they hold on to him when he gets to land and he's pronounced dead at land hospital, which I'm sure it looked like it was a couple days away from the land. John's ghost ever since has been spotted around that door area, and he lives on kind of as a spirit celebrity. Some have reported seeing a young bearded man wearing a white boiler suit looking for a wrench, maybe a wrench to like open up the door. On February 19th, 2021, someone posted a reply to a 2011 Blogspot post about John Petter saying, "John Petter was my uncle. The last picture I have of my Uncle John is when I was 6 months old with my mom, my nan, and it was taken in May of 1966 prior to his return to the Queen Mary." That's like crazy close to. He would die like 2 months later. Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, there was around the clock webcam at door 13, so ghost hunters could watch for his apparition. But Pauline, his sister, had a lot of misgivings about this. She told the Bradford Telegraph in 2000 that John was a human being, but they are treating him like a peep show. And valid. And the webcam has since been removed. A Facebook page called Queen Mary Paranormal in 2015 acknowledged the 49th anniversary of John's death, saying claims of murder and foolish behavior, such as playing the game of chicken, are pure speculation and extensions of misinformation, active imaginations, and subjective psychic feelings. It's a bit disrespectful, frankly. And that's a common theme in his story, is he was playing chicken with the doors, and that's how he got crushed. That's
literally what I was about to ask. I was like, wait, was it? Because that's what I heard too. Wow.
Yeah.
Now I feel terrible.
And, they've looked at the captain's logs. They've talked to people on board, and that's not what happened. It was a random accident. Maybe he saw the doors closing and he just tried to run through to get out of there, and he wasn't fast enough. And that's,
it's working on a ship of any size really is dangerous. And, it doesn't have to be put down to him doing something wrong. It can just be a tragic accident, as you said.
Yeah. This Facebook page says, "We like to side with historical fact in these matters. It's shown via Queen Mary Ship Archives, captain's logs, nurse reports, and crew interview documents we've had direct access to. The incident had no reported eyewitnesses at the time, and no witnesses or conspirators have come forward with claims 49 years since. The why to John's death will probably remain a mystery forever. The team is fortunate that for the first time in many years, John's passing anniversary date falls on a late night weekend paranormal investigation tour outing. When visiting the engine room that night, we plan to gather at door 13, pay our respects with a few words, share a moment of silence, and continue a tradition started a couple years ago of placing flowers on the door." Here's a passage from Sally Richards' 2012 Ghost Hunting Southern California book. This is a quote from paranormal researcher Sharon Coyle, who says, "I saw a shadow at the end of the galley walkway near door 13 and asked the spirit of John Petter if I could take a photo of him. I took the picture and got a photo of whom I believe to be him standing there with a gray work jumpsuit on. John is my favorite spirit on the Queen Mary, though most people favor Jackie in the pool, who is another spirit. John was always willing to communicate with me. For some reason, we had a connection. I've gotten EVPs, and EVPs are electronic voice phenomenons. When you record with like a tape recorder or something, you can hear in the noise, you can hear like a little voice. I've gotten EVPs from John in the engine room, including the complete sentence, "Hi, Sharon. Thank you for coming." What do you think? Do you think that's like actually a voice, or do you think that's Sharon being hopeful?
I'm a little more on the skeptic side, despite, loving these topics and the podcast and all the subjects, but I'm definitely more of a skeptic. So I'm going to probably say it's more wishful thinking, but I'd like to think that it's true because it is very sweet.
Okay, I'm going to play something from a YouTube channel called Para Explorer Project, which is a new tongue twister, an acting warm-up exercise. Para Explorer Project. Para Explorer Project. Para Explorer Project did an analysis of 2 audible voice phenomenons alleged to be John Petter's ghost. Okay, let's talk about this. And that's on their YouTube channel. I'm going to play the little clips.
Okay.
For months before the 50th anniversary of John's death, 2016, they had these communication sessions where they were trying to get John's permission to have an activity at his door. This is them recording what they did to ask John's permission. And it had been, they'd been doing it for weeks and months beforehand without hearing anything. And this is the time that they heard something. And for me personally, I have really bad hearing. I have like tinnitus. So I heard it. You know what? This is a Zoom, and Zoom filters out noise.
The small noises. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will just describe it. But you can, I'm going to link in the show notes. Go watch this YouTube video. You can hear a very faint yes. And they play it multiple times. You can hear a very faint yes. It might just be a random noun.
Whatever. Yeah.
But for me, I'm like, that's compelling. That's compelling.
To ask a yes or no question and to hear a yes back and not just like a random word. Because I feel like I see that a lot on the like paranormal shows of like, okay, they said you heard a random word that didn't answer what you asked. But to say yes or no and get a yes, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Ever since they've been going down there like weeks and months before his anniversary of his death to ask permission if they want to do a communication session on the anniversary of his death. And in 2018, they're able to hear another yes. So there's another recording. I'm going to link in the show notes. You can play it. But I also hear a very distinctive yes. And then I also, while this was being recorded, the person who's holding the iPhone and doing the recording, Mike, he's becoming very agitated. And they interview him. And actually, I'll play this because he explains what he felt while he was recording.
I was recording with the smartphone with the palm of my hand, the microphone facing outwards as Matt was asking questions to John. And when he asked about having a celebration, for, I think his memorial, I heard a whisper or a faint voice come from over my right shoulder in the back. And it said yes. I thought I heard yes. I wasn't sure. And I felt a chill over my right back side, and I felt a little kind of uncomfortable at the time, but I just kept recording. And after the questions were done, I went to immediately review the recordings and went back to that first question and heard the yes on the recording. I believe in paranormal experiences and the energies that are around us. I never really completely experienced it myself and heard something so definitively before like this, but I absolutely heard it tonight and it convinced me.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. Especially like, again, he's not like, oh, I definitely saw him and no one else did, right? He's saying like, I felt an energy. I heard what I thought was a yes. That felt compelling to me. And like that sounds very real to me,
Yeah. So check out paraexplorerproject.com. They have info on tours they do on the Queen Mary and the research that they do. They have a lot of recordings that they've done. And there's other paranormal tours that do the Queen Mary. One is greyghostproject.com, and they are actually hiring right now. And they also
lovers of ghosts.
yeah. I was a little disappointed by them not paying very well.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, that would be a really fun job, but y'all pay enough.
Yeah. It's definitely more of a hobby job.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't get to talk about like all the other like well-known ghosts that are on this ship. There's a little girl. There's the guy who died because he drank detergent. That was a weird one.
Yeah.
So there's, for folks interested in the Queen Mary, whether you live locally and can come by or not, there's like so many stories to look into besides just the few that we were able to talk about.
Yes. And we've been now doing this episode for well over an hour, so we should wrap it up. I have one, actually, there's so many different like little things. There's one story I saw on the comments section of unsolved.com, which is the Unsolved Mysteries website. And it goes, my school prom was at the Queen Mary in my junior year. I went with some friends to explore the ship since we basically had free access, as long as we stayed on the ship and out of areas that were off limits. We were walking down the hallway in the hotel part, and it was pretty quiet. We passed one room, and I stopped because I clearly heard a man and woman talking. The voices sounded like the couple was either right on the other side of the door of the room or if they were in a hallway right next to us. I asked my friend if she heard the voices, and she said it sounded like the people were whispering. We started to walk away when I heard footsteps coming up behind us. I turned around to see who it was, but no one was there. I figured maybe the footsteps had come from one of the rooms. My friend was getting uncomfortable, so they decided to head back to the dance area. I went back with them, but felt like I wanted to explore the ship a little bit more. I went back down the hallway, and we had just been walking down to see the rest of the guest quarters. As I walked down the hall, I kept hearing voices and thought I heard a door open and then close behind me. I headed for the promenade deck to see the ship's outside area. I came around the corner and saw a young woman. I waved to her. She smiled, waved back, took 2 steps towards me, and vanished. Let me tell you that I have seen ghosts my entire life, so I didn't react too much, but I had goosebumps from my head to my toes. I headed back to the dance area to meet back up with my friends. I stopped by the registration desk and asked the attendant if the hotel guests were told to stay in their rooms since our prom was taking place. She said, we don't have any hotel guests tonight. The ship is closed off to everyone but the students and chaperones. We do not rent out any rooms during private events like the prom. I told my best friend, and she freaked out because we clearly heard voices in more than one of the rooms we had passed that night.
That's really creepy, and also making me upset because our prom was at the Long Beach Aquarium just down the street.
Yeah.
We on the Queen Mary.
Yeah, the Queen Mary prom would be like the best prom ever.
Prom. Yeah, I mean, obviously, a little creepy with your prom, but that's fine. And a friendly ghost. That's a nice ghost. Wave hello.
Yeah, wave hello, disappear. I do love talking to people who see ghosts. My big thing is I always ask my Uber drivers, have you ever had a paranormal experience? And, there's certain people who see ghosts, and I think that's really cool. And I wish I was one of them, but I do not see ghosts.
Me neither.
Except you saw your weird, colorful people.
Well, those might have been aliens. So
yeah.
I heard a ghost once.
Oh, you heard a ghost. What did it say?
Nothing. It was breathing in my ear.
Where were you? Was it nighttime? Was it daytime?
It was the middle of the night. I was at an Airbnb in Oakland.
Oh my God. And it breathed in your ear.
Yeah. I was already kind of awake and trying to go back to sleep, and then it got right in my ear. I was like, that's cool. I'm just going to roll over, pretend that didn't happen, and go back to sleep.
Oh, that's so scary. Oh my God. That's amazing though. You weren't scared though, because
I was also like, what am I going to do? I'm tired. I'm just going to roll over.
That's fun. So this has been Haunted Hollywood Hour. And what are you looking forward to? What are you working on?
What am I doing? I mean, I'll be in New Zealand starting on Monday, which is in 2 days, which is crazy. So I'll be in, the other podcast mindset during
Yeah.
that time.
That's fun.
And I'll have lots to share about that while I'm there and when I get back. So that's what I'm working on. And I love this show, and I want to think of more cool LA things that we can do because I love LA and I love ghost stories.
Yes, I really want to do a episode on Poncho with you,
Oh yes, I started my notes doc.
woman stunt person. Let's do that. I'm looking forward to award season. I'm getting together an outfit. I'm planning an outfit in my head, and then I'm going to get together. It's going to be very do it yourself.
I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And this is Haunted Hollywood Hour. If you have any ideas for things that we should do for future episodes, email us at hauntedhollywoodhour@gmail.com. If you want to be on the show, email us hauntedhollywoodhour@gmail.com. If you have a request for something that you want us to do, email us. Also, be sure to give us a rating and a review on wherever you're listening to this on your podcast platforms. If you are just finding us through YouTube, we are a podcast and we are available wherever you get your podcasts. We also have an Instagram. So give us a little follow on Haunted Hollywood Hour, one word on Instagram. And that's it. We're coming to you every week. So you can usually find us either on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on how fast I can edit this thing. Thanks for joining us. Until next time. Bye.